This morning, my phone lit up. 16 missed calls from an unknown number. And just like that, I was 13 years old again, standing alone at South Station in Boston, watching the taillights of my parents' car disappear into the crowd. My mother's voice still rings in my head. Let's see how she finds her way home. That day didn't just change me. It made me into who I am now. I'm Charlotte Hayes, 31 years old, a UX designer in Seattle, and the daughter of two people who left me in a crowded train station on purpose as a parenting lesson. At least that's what they called it. I call it abandonment, emotional abuse, betrayal. You wouldn't know that by looking at my life today. I live in a quiet home with a dog named Juno, a partner who respects me, and a business I built from scratch. But this morning, that voicemail pulled me back into a version of myself I thought I'd buried. Before I tell you how I rebuilt my life from the ashes of what they did to me, and what I did when they tried to come back, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to walk away from people who were supposed to protect you, hit that subscribe button, because you're not alone. Growing up in Maple Ridge, Vermont, our family looked like something out of a holiday postcard. Gregory and Elaine Foster, local bakery owners with their two perfect kids, Ryan and me. Except I wasn't Charlotte Hayes back then. I was Lottie Foster, the other child, the one who didn't shine quite so brightly, who made too many waves and asked too many questions. Behind closed doors, our family was nothing like the one we displayed on church Sundays and town parades. My father's voice, loud and joking in public, turned sharp and cutting at home. My mother, praised for her cinnamon bread and community service, had a different skill set behind our front door. Cold silences, twisted logic, and sugar-coated cruelty. They called it tough love. But I now know better. The first time I truly understood how different I was from my brother, I was 7. I had asked for a second cookie after school. That night, I ate dinner outside in the cold as punishment for being selfish. That's when I started drawing, little stories on napkins and notebook corners. Because in those worlds, the adults were kind, and the children got to feel safe. I never thought they'd go so far as to actually leave me behind. Not until that day in Boston. And now, 20 years later, they've found me again. It starts with a voicemail from my brother, Ryan, a voice I haven't heard since I was 13. Hey, Lottie. Charlotte, I know it's been a long time. Dad's in the hospital. It's bad. I thought you should know. I froze. The kitchen blurred. My past and present slammed together like train cars. And suddenly, I wasn't safe anymore. Maple Ridge was the kind of town where people smiled at the grocery store and waved from their porches. To everyone on the outside, my family fit right in. My parents owned a popular bakery on Main Street, Foster's Hearth. Warm scones, fresh bread, Christmas lights on the windows year-round. My mother, Elaine, wore aprons embroidered with seasonal phrases. My father, Gregory, always had flour on his shirt and a booming laugh that made people feel like they belonged. Customers adored them. Church folks brought them casseroles during the holidays. People in town called us the sweet family. But behind the kitchen doors and stage smiles was something darker. There was a tension in our house that buzzed under the surface, constant and cutting. It wasn't visible to strangers, but I felt it every time I walked through the front door. My father's laugh disappeared the moment we got home. If a cake order went wrong at work or a supplier shorted him on flour, he took it out on us. Sometimes it was with words sharp enough to slice. Sometimes with silence. Sometimes with slamming cabinet doors that made me jump and swallow back tears. My mother didn't stop him. She became something worse. His shadow. She'd echo his disapproval with cold logic. You know how hard your father works. You should be more grateful. Or, he's teaching you to be strong. You're too sensitive. That word, sensitive, was always loaded. It meant weak. It meant disappointing. It meant wrong. Ryan, on the other hand, could do no wrong. He was 2 years older and lived in a completely different world. Varsity soccer captain, honor roll. Voted most charismatic in 8th grade. My parents treated him like a small-town prince. If he forgot to do chores, it was because he had so much on his plate. If I got a 97 on a math test, it was, What happened to the other 3%, Lottie? He wasn't cruel to me, just distant. Like he'd learned early on that siding with me wasn't worth the blowback. I became the scapegoat for everything. If the bakery had a bad week, it was because I distracted Mom with my whining. If the furnace broke, it was because I'd probably touched the thermostat again. If Dad was in a foul mood, it was because I was always sulking. I started to keep to myself. I learned to anticipate their moods, to walk lightly, to smile on cue. I spent hours in my room drawing, escaping into paper and pencil. Because there, I had control. There, I could breathe. But even in my imagined worlds, I couldn't prepare for what they'd do to me in Boston. That wasn't a bad day. That was the day they stopped pretending. There wasn't one moment when I realized what they were doing to me. It was the accumulation of 1,000 little lessons that told me love in our home had conditions. That safety was something you earned, not something you were given. When I was 8, I left a paint set out on the dining table. It stained the wood slightly. The next day, I came home from school to find all my sketchbooks gone, thrown away. My mother told me calmly, "That's what happens when you don't respect property." I didn't draw for a month after that. At 9, I missed the bus once after school because I had stayed late to help a teacher clean up art supplies. My dad was furious. He made me walk home, 5 miles, in the rain. "Next time," he said, handing me a towel when I arrived soaked and shivering. "Maybe you'll learn to manage your time better." There was the time I forgot to refill the ice trays. I wasn't allowed to use the freezer for a week. The time I fell off my bike and got a concussion, and they waited 4 hours before taking me to the clinic because they thought I was being dramatic. The list goes on. Forgotten lunches, shoes not lined up, talking back. Each mistake became an excuse for some new punishment disguised as a life skill. They called it tough love, preparing me for the real world, raising me right. I started calling it survival. When I turned 10, the bakery won a regional award. There was a newspaper interview, and my mother insisted we all dress up and smile. In the photo, you can barely tell that I had cried for an hour before it was taken. That morning, they had canceled my birthday party because I had rolled my eyes when Dad snapped at Mom. I became smaller, quieter, invisible whenever possible. I stayed late at school. I found excuses to sleep over at friends' houses, though I rarely talked about what home was really like. Who would believe me? To the outside world, we were a local treasure. Ryan started pulling away around then. He was busy with school, sports, friends. Sometimes I wondered if he noticed the difference in how we were treated. Sometimes I wondered if he chose not to. By the time I was 12, I had perfected the art of compliance. Straight A's, clean room, careful words, no sass, no tears. Just silent effort. But it never seemed to be enough. And then came the science fair. I won second place for an interactive ecosystem model I had built over weeks. I came home holding my certificate, beaming. My mom looked at it, then said flatly, "Second place means you weren't the best." My father added, "Guess you need to work harder next time." Ryan never came home with second. I went to my room, closed the door, and didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I'd already cried all the tears I had left for them. And just a few months later, they would take everything one step further, the lesson they would never be able to walk back from. It was a crisp Saturday morning in early November when they told me we were taking a family trip to Boston. I was 13. Dad said we'd go see Quincy Market, maybe visit the aquarium. Ryan wouldn't be coming. He had SAT tutoring, or so they claimed. That should have been my first red flag. We never did anything as just the 3 of us. Still, a part of me, desperate and hopeful, clung to the idea that maybe, just maybe, this was their way of softening. Breakfast was unusually warm. Mom hummed while making toast. Dad even packed me a sandwich for the road, turkey and cheddar, my favorite. I sat in the back seat, confused but cautiously optimistic. It took 3 hours to get to Boston. Dad played classic rock, and Mom quizzed me on US. Presidents from the passenger seat. If I got one wrong, Dad would click his tongue and shake his head. Even 5th graders know that, Lottie. Still, it felt almost normal. We pulled into a parking lot near South Station around noon. The place was packed. Commuters, travelers, noise everywhere. I had never seen anything like it. I stared wide-eyed at the marble arches and digital boards flashing with arrival times. Dad pulled over near the side entrance. "Hungry?" he asked. I nodded. "Good," Mom said, unbuckling her seatbelt. "We're just going to grab something and find a better parking spot. Stay right here by that bench. Don't move." "Can't I come with you?" I asked. "Don't be a baby," Dad snapped. "It's just 15 minutes. You're 13. I hesitated. "But I don't know the area." "Exactly," Mom said, turning to me with that familiar sharpness in her eyes. "Stay put. And think." And then they were gone. Their car disappeared into the chaos of downtown traffic. At first, I sat obediently. I watched people rushing past me with rolling suitcases, headphones, shouting kids. I kept looking at the digital clock above the station doors. 12:07, 12:15, 12:30. That hopeful flutter I'd clung to on the ride in? It curdled into dread. I stood and craned my neck, walked toward the corner, then back. Maybe they were lost. Maybe they were circling. Then, just after 1 p.m., I saw it. Our car. The dusty silver Toyota Highlander, inching through traffic across the street. I bolted toward the curb, waving my arms wildly. Relief surged in my chest. I thought maybe they'd come back. Maybe this had been a misunderstanding. And then I saw them. Dad at the wheel, Mom in the passenger seat, smiling, laughing. Mom rolled down the window and cupped her hand around her mouth like a cheerleader. "Say ya. Let's see how you find your way home, Lottie." And then the car pulled away, disappearing into the mess of Boston traffic. For a second, I didn't move. I couldn't. My brain refused to process what my eyes just saw. They had left me. On purpose. No lesson. No game. No surprise ending. Just gone. And for the first time in my life, I realized they weren't trying to teach me anything. They were trying to break me. I stood frozen on the edge of the sidewalk, watching as their car disappeared into the swarm of traffic. I waited for it to circle back. Waited for them to jump out and say, "Surprise, did you learn something?" But they didn't. They were gone. The tears didn't come at first. Just a hollow buzzing in my ears. I walked back to the bench like a robot, every part of me numb. People bustled around me, dragging suitcases, barking into phones, laughing with companions. I sat there for over an hour, trying to convince myself this wasn't real. Then I remembered. I didn't have a phone. They had never let me get one. Said it would make me soft. I had $11 and a granola bar in my backpack. No ID, no emergency contact list, just a sketchbook, a broken mechanical pencil, and a sandwich I suddenly couldn't eat. By 2:30, I started to shake. The station, with all its grandeur, became terrifying. So many doors, so many voices. I tried walking to the information desk, but my legs felt like sandbags. That's when I met Walter. He was an older man in a faded navy jacket with a commuter rail logo stitched above the pocket. He'd seen me circling the same area for almost 2 hours. He approached slowly, like someone who had done this before. "Miss, are you all right?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. He crouched slightly, looking up at me with steady eyes. "Are you waiting for someone?" I nodded, then shook my head. And then I whispered, "They left me." That was all it took. He guided me to a quieter corner office. Someone brought me water. Another person called the police. That's when Rachel appeared. She was a caseworker with shoulder-length braids and calm hands. She listened as I told her what happened, my voice shaking and halting. I showed her my report card that was still in my backpack. She read it, then folded it carefully like it mattered. "We're going to take care of you now, Charlotte," she said. "You're safe." That night, I stayed in a temporary youth shelter. I didn't sleep. I kept thinking they'd show up and drag me back home. That somehow this was still part of their lesson. But they didn't come. 2 days later, I was placed with Daniel and Emily Hayes, emergency foster parents who lived just outside Boston. They were in their 40s, no kids of their own, just a quiet house with a swing on the porch and a sleepy golden retriever named Toby. Emily greeted me with a cup of tea and didn't ask a single question. Daniel showed me the room they'd set up with lavender sheets and a small desk. "No pressure," he said. "We're just glad you're here." For the first time in years, no one raised their voice. No one demanded perfection. I still flinched when someone walked behind me or when a door shut too hard. But they gave me space. A month later, they asked if I'd be open to staying longer. 3 months after that, they asked if I wanted to be part of their family. For real. And that's the day Lottie Foster ceased to exist. I signed the adoption papers as Charlotte Hayes. Becoming Charlotte Hayes wasn't like flipping a switch. It was slow, quiet, like watching the sun rise through fog, warmth seeping in before you even realize the light has changed. Daniel and Emily never tried to replace my parents. They didn't ask for my secrets, they didn't push. They just showed up every single day with kindness that didn't need to be earned. When I spilled a glass of orange juice during breakfast one morning and instinctively froze, waiting for yelling, Emily just laughed and handed me a towel. "Don't worry, the floor needed a cleaning anyway." That moment broke something open in me. I cried for 15 straight minutes. She didn't ask why. They let me keep drawing. Gave me real sketchbooks, real pencils, a small bookshelf to keep them on. When Daniel saw one of my charcoal pieces, an abstract storm of jagged lines, he didn't ask what it meant. He just said, "That's powerful," and helped me mat it for framing. By the time I started high school, I still had nightmares. I still jumped when men raised their voices. I still thought I'd be sent away if I made a mistake. But little by little, their house became home. In sophomore year, I joined the art club. That's where I met Lena. Bright hair, quick wit, a laugh that could disarm anyone. She was the first person my age I told the truth to. Not all of it, but enough. She didn't look at me with pity. She looked at me like I mattered. I graduated with honors and, with Daniel and Emily's encouragement, applied to the University of Washington in Seattle. Far away. A blank canvas. My acceptance letter arrived on a rainy spring afternoon. We celebrated with homemade pizza and root beer floats. Emily cried. Daniel framed the letter. I moved across the country that August. College was overwhelming and freeing all at once. I majored in interaction design, blending my love for art with my need to make things that helped people. There was something deeply healing about designing interfaces that made life easier, simpler, kinder. That's also when I met Ethan. He was a nursing student volunteering at a campus health event. He offered me a granola bar and a gentle smile. Our friendship grew slowly, cautiously. I flinched the first time he touched my hand. He didn't pull away, but he didn't push either. He let me come to him on my own terms. 4 years later, I walked across the graduation stage, shaking with pride. Emily and Daniel sat in the front row, cheering louder than anyone. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was finally living. It had been over a decade since I last heard my brother's voice. That morning, as I stood in my kitchen in Seattle, the light streaming across the tile floor and the scent of coffee lingering in the air, I stared at my phone in disbelief. 16 missed calls, 1 voicemail. I pressed play. "Hey, Lottie. Charlotte. I know it's been a long time. I don't expect you to respond, but Dad had a stroke last night. It's serious, ICU. Mom's asking for you. I thought you should know." I didn't know what hit me first. The nausea or the cold wave crawling up my spine. It felt like a wire had snapped deep inside me, releasing something I had held in place for years. They had found me. I didn't respond right away. I went outside and sat on the porch steps with Juno curled at my feet. My fingers shook as I sent one text. What exactly happened? And what do you expect from me? The reply came within minutes. No expectations. He's stable, but the doctors say it was major. Mom, she's not handling it well. I just thought you deserved the choice to know. It was the sincerity that surprised me. Over the next few hours, I battled myself in circles. I called Emily, who said, "Whatever you decide, remember, this isn't about them. It's about what you need." I called Dr. Patel, my therapist now in Seattle, and she echoed the same. You don't owe them your peace. But if your peace requires something, closure, truth, even confrontation, then maybe this is a step. The next day, I agreed to meet Ryan at a neutral place, a quiet coffee shop in between our cities. I chose a table near the window, back to the wall, just in case. He walked in wearing a tan jacket and a nervous smile. His hair was thinner, his eyes more tired, but I still saw glimpses of the brother I once wished would save me. "Charlotte," he said as he sat. "Thanks for coming." "I haven't been Lottie in a long time," I replied. "I know," he said. "I figured you wouldn't want to see either of them, but I needed to say something too." He paused, took a breath. I knew what they were doing that day. I was 13. I overheard them planning it. I didn't stop them. The words hit like a fist to my chest. I told myself I was just a kid, that I couldn't do anything. But the truth is, I was scared. Scared of Dad. Scared they'd turn on me too. His voice cracked. And I've lived with that guilt every day since. I stared at him, stunned. Not just by the confession, but by what came next. They told everyone in town you ran away with some weird religious group in Boston. A cult, they called it. Said you refused to come home and cut all ties. Everyone believed them. I sat back slowly, blood draining from my face. My past wasn't just erased, it had been rewritten. 2 days later, I walked into the rehabilitation center in Concord with Dr. Patel by my side. Not as a patient this time, but as a survivor. Not as the terrified girl they left on a bench, but as the woman who built a life in spite of them. Ryan had arranged everything. My mother would not be present. The visit would be brief. I could leave at any moment. The nurse led us through quiet halls that smelled faintly of antiseptic and wintergreen lotion. As we approached room 214, my pulse thundered in my ears. My father looked smaller than I remembered, shrunken into a hospital bed, wires curling around his arms like vines. His once commanding voice had been replaced by the gentle hiss of oxygen. When his eyes opened and landed on me, they filled with stunned disbelief. "Lottie," he rasped. "It's Charlotte," I said evenly. "Charlotte Hayes." He blinked slowly, pain flickering across his face. "You came." "I didn't come for you," I replied. "I came for me." He tried to sit up, winced, and settled again. "I was a terrible father." I didn't answer. I thought I was toughening you up, teaching you to survive, but I was wrong. I see that now." His voice cracked and his eyes pooled with something that looked like regret, but it was 20 years too late. "You didn't make me stronger," I said quietly. "You made me disappear, and I had to rebuild myself piece by piece without you." "I never stopped thinking about you," he whispered. "Not a day." "Then why did you surrender your rights?" I asked. "Why did you tell people I ran off with a cult?" He closed his eyes. We were ashamed of what we did. So we turned it into a story where we were the victims. It was easier. "Easier for you," I replied. "Not for the girl who had to explain her name change to strangers, who spent years wondering what she did wrong." He said nothing after that. Maybe because there was nothing left to say. I stood. "I wish you peace, Gregory. But we are not family. Not anymore." As I turned to leave, he reached out weakly, but I stepped back. Dr. Patel and I exited into the crisp afternoon light. I took a deep breath. The weight was still there, but lighter, manageable. Finally, mine to carry how I chose. Back home that night, Ethan held me. Juno curled between us. I told Emily and Daniel everything. And for the first time in my life, the past didn't feel like a chain. It felt like a story I had finished. I had walked away from the train station, and this time, I never looked back.